Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back in time, not to a royal court, not to a lavish banquet, but straight into the mud-caked, callus-covered, and deeply chafed life of a medieval peasant farmer. Picture this: your bed is stuffed with straw, the roof leaks onto your face every time it rains, and something with too many legs skitters across your arm just as the rooster screams into your ear. You're about to live like one of the 90% of medieval people who weren't knights or noblewomen, or monks illuminating manuscripts in warm cloisters. No. You're the backbone of society, the bent, creaking, unwashed backbone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in total darkness. There's no sunrise alarm clock here. Your body's natural clock has been trained to stir the moment the cockerel crows, which, lucky you, happens around 4:30 a.m. in summer. Winter lets you sleep in a bit. All the way to 5:15. Your house is a one-room timber frame cottage, walls stuffed with wattle and daub. The floor is hard-packed dirt. The ceiling is low enough to headbutt if you stand tall. In the corner, your spouse and 2 children snore softly on the straw pallet you all share. On colder nights, a chicken or 2 might join in for warmth. Occasionally, the pig tries to as well. You reach for your clothing. By clothing, we mean the single tunic you've worn since Michaelmas and will continue wearing until it disintegrates or you do. Wool itches, stinks, heavy with yesterday's sweat. You add a belt made of rope, then slide on wooden clogs because shoes made of actual leather are reserved for festivals, funerals, and the Reeves' daughter. You open the door. The air hits your face like a slap from a cold, wet rag. You step outside and immediately regret it. It rained last night. Again, the path to the byre is now a morass of ankle-deep mud. The pig greets you by trotting through it and rubbing affectionately against your leg. You now smell like pig. The first task: livestock. Chickens must be scattered and counted, lest one has been stolen or worse, become the midnight snack of a local fox. Cows must be milked, a task that sounds bucolic until your hands are cramping and the cow kicks over the bucket twice. The goats need hay. The geese hate you on principle. And then there's the outhouse, or rather, the lack thereof. You relieve yourself in a pit behind the hedge, dodging thistles and trying not to think about how close this is to the communal well. Breakfast is ready, which is to say, it exists. Your wife reheats yesterday's barley porridge, scraping the crust off the sides of the iron pot. If you're lucky, it's been flavored with a single onion or a few shavings of bacon. If you're really lucky, it doesn't have weevils today. It's served with a crust of sour, heavy bread that could double as a weapon. You eat in silence. No time to talk. No energy either. The children are already dragging bundles of kindling toward the hearth. Your youngest has a runny nose that won't stop running. You briefly consider whether it might be the ague or just what children are always like. You trudge out toward your rented fields. Rented from whom, you ask? Ah yes, your lord. Because nothing you farm actually belongs to you, not the land, not the trees, not even the birds you might try to trap in secret. Those technically belong to the crown. As the sun creeps over the hills, you begin to see your fellow villagers emerging from their homes, all with the same hunched gait, the same bleary eyes, the same boots caked with yesterday's regrets. There's that one guy who claims to have seen St. Cuthbert in a puddle. There's the widow who makes herbal poultices and also maybe curses your milk to sour. There's the reeve, the village enforcer, who's already watching to make sure you show up for your obligatory corvée labor tomorrow. Historians still argue whether peasants saw themselves as hopelessly downtrodden or simply accepted the cycle of work, prayer, and taxation as immutable law. But one thing they agree on: the average medieval farmer was busy, as in 12 to 16 hours of physical exertion a day, kind of busy. No weekends, no paid holidays, just an endless relay race between sowing, reaping, hauling, patching, and trying not to die. Back at the field, you inspect the barley you planted weeks ago. It's there, sort of. You flick a slug off one stalk and sigh. The weeds are winning again. You grab a hand plow, which weighs more than a sleepy donkey, and begin the day's real labor. The plowshare catches on a hidden stone and nearly yanks your shoulder out of joint. Your back already hurts, and it's not even mid-morning. Meanwhile, your neighbor has invented a new way to irritate you. He's singing loudly about St. Crispin. You hum something passive-aggressive in response. Midday arrives with little fanfare. You eat your lunch standing in the field. More bread, this time with a scraping of lard if you're blessed. Someone shares a dried apple. You bite it, and immediately, Regret trusting your molars. Here's a fringe tidbit: in some villages, especially in the wetter parts of England, it was common to rotate sleeping arrangements based on warmth and pest load. You might get to sleep by the hearth one week and be relegated to the corner with the draft and the suspicious mildew the next dot, and so the day crawls onward. You think longingly of sitting down, but the moment you do, a dog appears and licks your ear. You stand again. The dog looks disappointed. By late afternoon, your tunic is stuck to your back. Your legs ache, and your hands are stained with the crust of soil, sweat, and cow-related substances you'd rather not analyze too closely. You return home. The sky is darkening. A single candle flickers in the window. Inside, it's smoky and warm. Someone's managed to catch a fish, an actual fish, and it's boiling over the hearth in a pot that hasn't been scrubbed since Pentecost. You say a prayer of thanks. You eat in silence again, and then it's straight to bed. You collapse on the straw. There's a beetle in your pillow. You flick it away. The pig is already snoring. You envy it. You wake up sore. Not the good kind of sore, the noble, post-workout kind that whispers, "Well done, champion." No, this is the kind of ache that says, your joints hate you and will now creak like a haunted drawbridge for the next 30 years. Your shoulders crack. Your spine stages a minor protest. And it's raining again. The fire has gone out. The air in the cottage is damp and metallic, tinged with wood smoke, old sweat, and something moldy that no one's been brave enough to investigate. You sit up, brush straw off your tunic, and immediately step in something wet. It could be spilled water. It could be pig urine. Honestly, you no longer ask. You glance at your spouse, who is already layering on a shawl, preparing to fetch water before the village boys get there and make a mess of the well. The kids are still asleep, but that won't last long. Someone coughs, someone else starts scratching. There's a lice problem again. Of course, today, your tasks are numerous. There's no strict schedule because everything needs doing all the time. But you prioritize based on urgency, weather, and which jobs the reeve might find you for skipping. Your thatch roof has started leaking more aggressively. There's a spot near the hearth where water now drips in rhythmic plinks. You'll need to patch it with straw bundles again. The trick is harvesting the thatch without stealing it from the Lord's fields, which, technically, you've done before, just once, maybe twice. You venture into the drizzle and head for the common pasture. There's your cow blot standing miserably beneath a tree, tail flicking. Her expression says, "Don't talk to me until you've brought oats." You coax her homeward with a handful of clover and a half-hearted whistle. The mud sucks at your clogs like it wants to eat you whole. Back at the cottage, your eldest is trying to chase a chicken back into the enclosure. It's not going well. The chicken has plans, ambitions, possibly a vendetta. You step in and narrowly avoid being pecked in the shin. Once the animals are contained and vaguely fed, it's time for your second job of the day, thatching. You borrow a ladder from your neighbor. He makes you promise not to break it like last time and climb onto the roof, balancing straw bundles, twine, and a dull knife. Here's the thing they don't tell you in those romantic illustrations of English villages. Thatching is terrifying. One slip and you're in the pigpen with a twisted ankle and 3 geese judging your life choices. Your fingers are numb. The wind is picking up, and you're 85% certain something just scuttled inside the thatch and made eye contact with you. Historians still argue whether peasants fully understood the structural elements of their homes, or just relied on trial error, an oral tradition passed down from relatives with suspiciously missing fingers. But either way, you finish your patch job with minimal blood loss and only minor splinters. Success. You clamber down just in time for the parish bell to toll. Time for mass. You groan inwardly but trudge along. Missing church is a punishable offense, and your soul does need saving. Apparently, the entire village crowds into the cold stone building. The air thick with incense and damp wool. You kneel. You stand. You try not to fall asleep. The priest drones on in Latin. Nobody understands a word. But that doesn't stop old Margaret in the front row from nodding sagely like she's been besties with St. Jerome. Mass ends, and the gossip begins. Someone claims they saw a monk riding a donkey backward. Someone else insists the miller's daughter is secretly a fairy. You drift toward the back, avoiding eye contact with the reeve. Lunch, if you can call it that, is eaten outside. You share a pottage of peas and garlic with your family. It's warm, it's salty, it's almost tasty. You even have ale today, not a lot, but enough to soften the edges of reality. Then comes the worst job of all, repairing fences. Your garden fence has been sagging for weeks, and the neighbor's goat took that as an open invitation to help itself to your leaks. You grab your mallet and a pile of splintered stakes and start hammering. It's here, halfway through a particularly stubborn knot of brambles, that you start to ask, how do people live like this? You've only been here 2 days, maybe 3. It feels like months. Every part of you hurts. Every moment is work. Even relaxing is a job. You take a break, leaning against the fence post. And that's when you notice your youngest sneaking toward the stream with a bundle of cloth. You yell after them because last time, they tried to wash your good shirt and nearly drowned a goose in the process. Once disaster is averted, it's back to more chores. You help your spouse collect herbs from the overgrown hedgerow, mugwort, yarrow, comfrey. Some for salves, some for tea. Some for the kind of folk medicine that involves spitting 3 times and muttering something. About moonlight, here's a quirky tidbit. In some parts of Europe, farmers swore by placing iron nails under their doorways to ward off fairies, who were apparently responsible for everything from crop failure to colicky infants. You hammer one into the threshold just in case. The last thing you need is a supernatural infestation on top of everything else. As twilight falls, your bones buzz with exhaustion. You think about dinner, but all that's left is hard bread, thin beer, and the dubious smell coming from the pot near the hearth. You'll eat it anyway, inside. The candle has been replaced by a resin torch wedged into the wall. It sputters and smokes, filling the room with a strange piney aroma and just enough light to let you see the rat scurrying near the grain sack. You make a mental note to trap it tomorrow. Finally, mercifully, it's bedtime. You curl up on the straw mattress, your spouse beside you, children already murmuring and twitching in half dreams. The roof doesn't leak, your thatch held. A small wind. As your eyes close, you wonder what tomorrow's disaster will be. Rain again, a tax collector, a plow that breaks in the middle of sowing. But for now, you sleep, and the chicken sleeps, too, right on top of your chest. You're jolted awake by the sound of shouting. At first, you think it's another livestock escape, maybe Blot the cow has staged a coup again. But no, it's worse. It's the Reeve, and he's standing outside your door with 2 men, all of them very damp and very annoyed. Turns out, the Lord has called for extra laborers to help dig a drainage ditch. Something about the lower field being too boggy. You were hoping to plant today. Now you'll be wielding a spade and sticky clay for half a day unpaid, of course. It's your feudal duty. Feudalism is great, right? You stumble out the door half-dressed, chew on a crust of old bread as breakfast, and join the small procession of neighbors heading to the worksite. You're not alone in your misery. Half the village is trudging alongside you, eyes bleary, shoulders slumped. Everyone is carrying shovels, picks, or the kind of optimism that only lasts until the first blister. The work site is muddy. The ditch is long. The instructions are vague. The overseer, a man with a permanent sneer and a hat far too fancy for someone standing ankle-deep in muck, tells you to dig straight and then disappears into a tent. You dig. The rain picks up. Your boots fill with cold brown water. You're fairly sure your spine is folding into a question mark. One neighbor suggests pretending to be sick. Another fakes a limp. But none of you are brave enough to try it. You've heard stories of peasants whipped or fined for shirking labor, even when they were genuinely ill. Historians still argue whether enforcement was consistently brutal, or just depended on how crabby the steward was that day. Either way, you keep your head down and dig. Lunchtime is a joke. Someone passes around a turnip. Not a cooked one, just a turnip. You nibble the edge and try not to cry. Eventually, the Reeve calls an end to the work. You've made some progress. Although the ditch looks more like a serpentine trench built by drunk beavers. You're covered in mud from toe to ear. Even your eyelashes feel dirty. You squish homeward in silence. Once back, you strip off your outer tunic, hang it by the hearth to dry, and sit on a stool. The fire is warm. The kids are arguing over who gets the less moldy half of a cheese rind. Your spouse hands you a bowl of boiled barley and leeks, topped with an egg. You want to complain, but it's the best thing you've eaten in days. As you eat, you overhear your eldest talking about May Day. It's still a few weeks off, but already the village is buzzing. You've forgotten there was fun to be had. On May Day, everyone gathers in the green. There's music and dancing. Even a bit of stolen meat if you're lucky. You once danced until your feet gave out and you lost your left shoe in a puddle. It's probably still there, but you don't dwell on it too long. Tomorrow is tax day. You grimace. Tax day means the bailiff comes around with his ledger, asking what you've got to give. Spoiler alert, not much. You might owe in barley, or beans, or perhaps in eggs if the hens cooperate, which they usually don't. One of them laid a soft-shelled egg this morning. That collapsed like an overripe peach. You think back to that conversation last week with old Yannick, the village's unofficial philosopher. He swears the monks up at the abbey only pay a fraction of what peasants owe. It's all wine and candle wax for them, he said, while we scrape together lentils and excuses. He might be right. The church owns half the land around here, and no one dares question them. Once, a neighbor grumbled too loudly about the tithe and woke up to find a dead crow nailed to his door. Whether it was divine warning or teenage mischief, nobody knows. After dinner, you fetch a clay pot of ointment from the shelf, a sob of goose fat and plant leaves. It smells like disappointment, but it does soothe the blister you've developed on your hand. You smear it on, wincing, and wrap your palm in linen. Your spouse joins you, holding a bit of homespun cloth they've been dyeing with woad. The color is a murky blue, more swamp frog than royal hue, but it's beautiful in its way. You watch them twist the damp fabric, hands practiced, brow furrowed. This moment, small and quiet, is the closest thing to peace you've had in days. You hear a story while resting on the doorstep. Apparently, someone in the next village over was caught making elf bread, a strange barley loaf marked with runes. Supposedly keeps fairies away from your livestock. The baker was fined, naturally, but not before half the local women started copying the recipe. Just in case. It's getting dark. You pour water into a carved wooden bowl and splash your face. Your reflection looks tired and slightly wild-eyed. You smell like a muskrat in despair. Still, you're alive. You light the rushlight. Its little flame flickers and dances, casting long shadows across the wall. You settle into bed, and for the first time in what feels like years, it's silent. Even the chicken seems to have given up on its rebellion. Just before you drift off, you think, tomorrow, you'll offer the bailiff your last sack of rye and pray he doesn't ask for more. And then, if you're lucky, you'll only have to shovel out the latrine pit. The rooster crows again. This particular rooster has a talent for being early, loud, and profoundly annoying. You briefly consider stewing him for supper. But remember that chickens are valuable. Eggs, after all, are one of your last dependable assets. Which brings you to the true horror of the morning. Today is tax day. You try to recall everything you owe. There's your labor dues to the manor already paid in yesterday's muddy trench debacle. Then there's your grain tithe to the church, plus your rents to the Lord, a possible poultry levy if someone decides you're too well stocked, and a brewing fee if the local ale taster decides the jug of barley drink on your shelf looks suspiciously like a commercial venture. You do a quick inventory: 2 sacks of rye, 1 very lean chicken, a handful of leeks, and half a round of slightly fuzzy cheese. Not ideal. Outside, the village is already awake. You hear the clink of scales as the reeve sets up his inspection table. A crowd gathers, some hopeful, some resigned. Tax day always feels like judgment day with paperwork. You shuffle into line, sack of rye over your shoulder, trying to look poorer than you actually are. It's a performance art. When it's your turn, the bailiff eyes you with the suspicion of someone who believes every peasant is hiding a cow out back. He weighs your rye, makes a note in his wax tablet, and then, because he can, says, you also owe 1 hen or its value in coin. You point to your 1 remaining chicken, still molting from last week's rain. That one, he says, eyeing it dubiously, looks diseased. 3 farthings instead. You don't have 3 farthings. You don't have one. What you do have is a moderately charming smile and a very tired spouse, who emerges from the house at that exact moment holding a jug of ale. A bribe, a gift, a neighborly gesture, who's to say? The bailiff takes it, sniffs it, and waves you off. You're officially square for now. Which is medieval tax talk for we'll be back. You exhale. Just a little. Taxes in the medieval world aren't just about silver or barley, they're about layers. There's the manor tax, the church tithe, the king's levy. Sometimes a bridge needs mending or a war needs funding, and suddenly you owe another sack of beans or 3 days of labor. Historians still argue whether peasants fully understood the web of obligations they lived under, or if they simply complied out of habit and hope. You suspect it's the latter. Back home, you try to explain the situation to your family. Your youngest wants to know why the Lord needs so many chickens. You don't have an answer, so you invent one. He's building a feather bed for the bishop. Everyone laughs. Or groans. Hard to tell these days. By midday, the village has settled into a sullen rhythm. The poorest households are bartering their winter stores to cover dues. One man offers a wheel of wormy cheese for a pair of woolen socks. The cheese loses. You hear a commotion at the village edge. 2 monks on donkeys, gliding in like royalty. They're from the nearby priory, and they've come to collect their share of the tithe, which includes smoked fish, candles, and beeswax. You watch as a neighbor hands over 3 jars of honey and murmurs something under his breath. Honey is precious. That family will have to sweeten their pottage with dried crabapples until next season. There's a brief distraction as someone's goose escapes and takes a victory lap round the green. It runs directly under the monk's donkey, causing one of them to yell and drop his basket. Out tumbles a small wooden carving of St. Cuthbert missing his nose. The monk hurriedly stuffs it back in, mumbling Latin. You're not sure if it's a prayer or a curse. You offer to help chase the goose, not out of kindness, just to avoid eye contact with the monks. Too much curiosity can get you volunteered for unpaid penance work. Once you've cornered the goose, it turns out to be a surprisingly strategic opponent. You return home with sore knees and one feather in your hair. Your spouse is there, laying out the last of the year's dried peas. Do you think we'll make it to harvest? They ask. You want to say yes, so you do. But inside, you're not sure. As dust settles, you take out the ledger you've been keeping, a secret one, hidden in a hollow beam in the wall. Just notations, really. How many eggs this month? How much barley you lost to mold? Which neighbors are behind on their own taxes? It's not for profit, just for sanity. You recall a story from last winter. A peasant in Norfolk, clever with numbers, began keeping his own accounts. When the reeve came to collect, the man presented his records to prove the taxes were wrong. The reeve burned the ledger and fined him double, but in your case it's comforting just to know, even if no one else will ever read it. Night falls. The fire crackles low. You're staring into the embers when you realize next week is Heriot week. If someone dies, their best ox gets seized by the Lord as a death tax. Just another cheerful tradition to look forward to. You rise, stretch, and peek outside. The wind is picking up, rattling the shutters. A storm is coming. You pull the chicken inside, she's earned it, and wedge the door shut. You have a dream. Tonight, a strange one. You're presenting your taxes to a group of robed cats seated at a long table. One of them demands your soul, another just wants more barley. You wake up confused, clutching your ledger. Still, it's better than dreaming. About the bailiff. The first thing you hear is howling. It's not the rooster for once. It's the long, low cry of a wolf echoing faintly through the early morning mist, bouncing between the trees at the edge of your fields. It might be real, or it might be someone's dog with ambition. Either way, you tighten the shutters and mentally count your remaining livestock. The sheep are still there, probably, you hope. The pen's just far enough from the cottage to make checking feel like a heroic quest. Before breakfast, today, the wolves are the least of your worries. You're headed to the village green for the latest installment of rural drama, Harvest Edition. The windmill has broken again and the local miller, Watt, insists that it's not his fault. Everyone else, including you, suspects he's just been pocketing a little too much grain and avoiding repairs. The miller's apprentice swears up and down that spirits haunt the place. Either way, no flour means no bread, and no bread means you're facing a very cranky family. On the way to the green, you pass Alice, the hedge healer. She nods in that vague, mysterious way she does, equal parts kindness, and I might hex your cow. You ask if she has anything for your aching back, and she hands you a bundle of dried foxglove with zero explanation. You tie it to your belt. Can't hurt, probably. A crowd gathers by the windmill. The village reeve is there, arms crossed, flanked by the manor steward who looks as though he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Watt the miller gives a loud, theatrical sigh and begins explaining the unseasonal dampness and divine misfortune that have apparently cracked the millstone. The townspeople are unconvinced. Someone mutters about Watt's new boots. Someone else claims they saw him sneaking barley to his cousin in the next village. Accusations fly. A woman near the back says she heard the windmill groan like a dying man. Another insists it was a warning from St. Benedict. You chime in, suggesting perhaps someone simply forgot to oil the gears. Silence. Everyone turns to look at you like you've just insulted St. Benedict to his face. A small child whispers he must be in league with the mill spirits, and just like that, your day derails. You see, medieval communities aren't just close-knit, they're tightly wound. Superstition fills the cracks between every explanation. If something breaks, someone caused it. If you stumble, it might be a curse. And if you speak logically when everyone else is in a spiraling tale about windmill goblins, well, you start looking a bit suspicious. Later that afternoon, you notice Alice giving you a very long look from her hut. She gestures you over and, in an oddly friendly tone, offers to wash the shadows from your spirit for a small fee, 2 eggs and a dried eel. You decline politely and walk home faster than usual. Inside your cottage, things feel off. The hearth smokes too much. The dog won't stop staring at the corner. A spider you don't remember has taken up residence in your boot. You remind yourself this is just life. Rural homes are drafty, unpredictable, and full of vermin. But once your neighbors start whispering that your bread rises oddly fast or your leeks are to green, It doesn't take much to tip from eccentric farmer to village concern. Even your spouse raises an eyebrow when the dog starts howling at the wind. You try to distract everyone with a story. A funny one. You recall the tale of the farmer who swore his ox was speaking Latin. It caused a local panic. Until it turned out the ox was just wheezing in a peculiar rhythm. The monks declared it a miracle. The Lord declared it a property dispute. It gets a half smile. You'll take it. Night creeps in with a chill. You light the rushlight, a twisted bundle of dried rushes dipped in animal fat, and watch the tiny flame flicker against the walls. Shadows stretch like long fingers. The house creaks. A branch scrapes the window in a rhythm that feels almost intentional. You try not to think of curses, or wolves, or windmills. Instead, you recall a curious event from just a few years ago. A woman in a neighboring village was accused of bewitching the baker's yeast. They said her mere glance could curdle cream. When they couldn't find any actual proof, they made her walk backward around the church 7 times, then dunked her in the river. She floated. They said she was fine. Historians still argue whether that was considered a good or bad result. No one ever saw her again. You lie awake, staring at the thatch above, wondering if this is how it starts: one cracked windmill, one suspicious loaf. And suddenly you're the topic of whispered meetings. Just before you drift off, you hear it again. The wolf cry. Closer now. You get up, wrap yourself in your wool cloak, and step outside. The moon is bright. The trees are still. You walk to the sheep pen, half expecting to find a massacre. Instead, you find the youngest lamb chewing on your bootless, utterly unconcerned. You pat its head and mutter something about how you should have been a sheep. All you'd have to do is eat grass and avoid becoming stew. Back in bed, the wind howls again. But you don't hear wolves anymore. Just weather. Still. You move the chicken inside again, just to be safe. You wake up itchy. That's your first clue. The second is the faint but unmistakable scent of unwashed wool, wood smoke, and a sort of sour person smell that you're now beginning to recognize as you. It's been nearly 2 weeks, and the medieval dream of becoming one with the land has mostly translated into becoming one with your own body odor. The good news: it's bath day. The bad news: bath is a generous word. To be clear, it's not that medieval folks never washed. It's that the when, where, and how don't quite meet modern standards. You've scraped the dirt from under your nails daily with a sliver of broken horn. You've wiped your face with damp linen cloth. You even chewed on a sprig of mint once, which counts as brushing your teeth. Probably. But today is the full affair: a visit to the local bathhouse. And you're not going alone. You pack a linen cloth, your least mildewed tunic, and some hard soap made from rendered animal fat and wood ash. It smells like a combination of bacon and regret. Still, it's soap. The bathhouse is down by the stream, part of a timber-framed building that also functions as a sort of social hub. Occasional medical tent, and on Thursdays, a place for minor exorcisms. Inside, it's humid and smoky. A great copper cauldron bubbles over a hearth, ready to be dumped into large wooden tubs, which are lined with straw mats and questionably clean towels. You're greeted by a woman named Maud who manages the place. With the efficiency of a general and the warmth of a wet sponge, she points you to a tub and says, "Try not to die in it, eh?" Classic Maud. You're sharing the water. Of course, it's a 3-person system. First comes the oldest person, then the guest of honor you, then finally a small child or 2. The logic is unclear. The water, however, is visibly murky by the time you sit in it. You let out a little hiss as your legs sink into the hot mix of water, steam, and other people's decisions. Your skin instantly begins to itch in reverse, which you interpret as an improvement. Someone hands you a brush made of horsehair and bark. You use it vigorously for a brief moment. You feel cleanish. Then the door bursts open and in walks Brother Thomas, the local monk barber. He's here for your haircut. This is the 3rd worst idea you've had today. Medieval barbers are many things: shavers, surgeons, tooth pullers, but gentle isn't one of them. You sit on a stool while Brother Thomas sharpens his shears on a piece of leather and talks about sins that hide behind the ears. He hacks at your hair with the focus of a man exorcising demons. When he finishes, you're about 3 inches shorter, and your ears feel exposed in a way that can only be described as spiritually vulnerable. After the haircut, you're offered tooth powder. It's made of crushed oyster shells, sage, and something that might be salt. You dip your finger in and scrub your teeth until your gums bleed slightly. This, apparently, is the goal. When you spit, your mouth tastes like minty gravel. Still, your breath no longer frightens livestock, so you consider it a win. Before you leave, you're sprinkled with rose water. Just a splash. It's a little sticky, and you suspect the rose in question may have been more theoretical than botanical. But still you're the cleanest you've been in days. Clean, but not comfortable. Because there's another part of medieval hygiene you weren't quite ready for, the latrine situation. Your cottage has no bathroom as such. What it does have is a wooden bench with a hole over a pit out back, visited mostly at night and never with joy. In summer, the smell attracts flies. In winter, the seat freezes over. There's moss for wiping. Occasionally, if you're lucky, a bit of soft wool. And let's not forget that frogs sometimes live in the pit. They're not helpful. You've learned to time your visits carefully. Now, inside your home, you notice that your spouse is eyeing you suspiciously. Not because of your recent encounter with the bathhouse, but because you used up the last of the good soap. And also because you insisted on trying a toothbrush, which your children now think is sorcery. So, you decide to distract them with a story. You tell them about the Hungarian noblewoman who bathed in wine to stay youthful, or the Roman baths that had underfloor heating. Historians still debate whether some medieval lords actually tried to replicate these Roman innovations or simply pretended they did when bragging to visitors. They laugh politely. Then someone sneezes, and here it is, your old nemesis, illness. Despite your valiant attempts at cleanliness, you know you live in a world without germ theory. Sickness comes from bad air, or an imbalance of bodily humors, or maybe just looking at someone the wrong way after they spilled salt. A cough isn't just a cough, it could be the beginning of something that will send half the village to the churchyard. You hand your spouse the foxglove bundle Alice gave you. They stare at it like it's both poison and miracle, which, to be fair, it probably is. That night, you lie in bed smelling vaguely of roses and smoke, your scalp prickling where your haircut left uneven patches. Your skin feels raw but satisfyingly deterted. You consider how often you'd be willing to do this again. Once a month. Once a season. Once per major church holiday. Maybe next time. You'll try not to go after the oldest man in town. You fall asleep to the familiar creaks of the cottage, the distant bleating of sheep, and a faint whiff of horsehair shampoo. Tomorrow, you'll be dirty again before noon. But tonight, you're almost medieval fancy. You wake with a start to the sound of shouting. It's still dark. The kind of deep, pre-dawn darkness that only medieval villages know. No streetlights, no glow from windows. Just the occasional flicker of a fire left burning low. The shouting grows clearer. Someone is yelling about pigs. You scramble into your tunic, half blind with sleep and fear, and dash outside barefoot. The sky is just starting to bruise with light, and your breath hangs like fog. And yes, there they are. Half a dozen pigs have escaped from the communal pen and are doing laps through your neighbors' turnip patch like they're training for the swine Olympics. You sigh loudly. Because, of course, you're on pig duty this week. Within minutes, you and 3 other villagers are trying to corral them using sticks, buckets, and a frankly unhelpful sheepdog named Barlow who thinks the pigs are playing a game. Your feet are freezing. Your dignity is non-existent. Eventually, the pigs are caught. The turnips are trampled, and you're handed a bucket of barley mash and told not to let it happen again. You trudge back home, barley splashed down your front, and notice something that brings you to a full stop. Your fence is broken. Not badly, just a few slats, but it's enough for a goat to get in, or a child to get out. You look around. Your younger daughter is sitting calmly on a stump, watching the sunrise and chewing on a stick. You sigh again, this time with something like affection. Because here's the truth. You're exhausted, sore, and mildly filthy. But you're also surviving, sort of. You've learned to eat food you can't name. You've milked animals that want nothing to do with you. You've slept on hay, traded gossip for eggs, and made your peace with communal bathing. You even know what month it is, mostly based on which saint's feast is coming up next. But the toll has been real. Your back is bent in a way that's beginning to feel permanent. You have a splinter in your thumb that's turning an interesting shade of green. You haven't had a proper bowel movement in 3 days. And you strongly suspect that the family goat dislikes you personally. You're starting to understand why medieval farmers didn't live long lives, or restful ones. But here's the twist. They also didn't do it alone. This week alone. Alice, the herb wife, gave you a tincture for your cough. Old Peter showed you how to straighten a bent nail using the base of a frying pan. Your neighbor Tom loaned you his best spade for planting and didn't even ask for bread in return. And when your daughter caught a fever, 3 people came to sit with her just in case. There's a strange tenderness woven into the hard edges of daily survival. And while your modern brain is still screaming about the lack of soap and antibiotics, there's a small part of you, traitorous and curious, that doesn't hate the rhythm of it. You've started to measure time by the sound of the church bell, the rising and falling of smoke from chimneys, and the lengthening of shadows on the path. You know the smell of incoming rain. You can tell who's baking what by scent alone. You've gotten used to it, but that doesn't mean you last. Because this morning, as you reach for your breakfast, you realize the bread is gone, molded. The last hunk of rye has turned green and fuzzy overnight. Your stomach sinks. You check the cheese. It's sweaty and smells like betrayal. The milk, sour again. You go outside. Find 3 withered apples and a few raw beans in a basket, and sigh so hard your knees ache. This is the quiet crisis of medieval farming. The hunger between harvest audits. Not starvation, not yet. But it's close enough that you start counting roots. You consider boiling nettles. You weigh whether it's too early to dig into the grain you were saving for winter. Historians still argue whether most peasants lived in near constant famine, or simply suffered through predictable lean months. But right now, you can tell which side you'd be on. You spend the day weak and grumpy, snapping at the children and yelling at the hens for not laying enough eggs as if they understand economics. You eat the raw beans and immediately regret it. That night, your stomach twists into a knot of protest and you curl up by the fire, whispering promises to every god you've ever heard of that you'll never waste a crust of bread again. And then, mercifully, it rains. Not just a drizzle of full soaking, honest-to-goodness downpour. You and half the village stand outside in it, hands raised, laughing like mad people. The fields drink, the barrels fill, the animals perk up. Someone brings out a jug of cider. Someone else sings a song with only 3 notes but 7 verses. And, for one shining moment, you forget about the beans. You go to bed that night full of cider, rain-wet, and humming a song you didn't know you knew. Tomorrow will be just as hard, but you made it to 2 weeks, barely. The fire is low now. The room glows with that soft, flickering warmth that makes everything look gentler. Even the warped wooden floor and the mismatched shoes lined up by the door. Outside, the rain has faded into quiet dripping. The animals are still. The village sleeps, and you've earned your rest. Your body hums with the dull ache of effort, the kind of tire that comes not from running in place, but from truly living, working, eating, worrying, laughing. Every muscle feels used. Every thought has slowed. You shift beneath the wool blanket and close your eyes. You think of the first morning, when your hands were clean and your pride was high. You think of the turnips, the pigs, the smoke, of laughter around the fire and frost on your breath. You think of the rough kindness of strangers who became something more. You tried your best, and even though you wouldn't last another week, maybe, just maybe, you've glimpsed the quiet power in a life lived close to the earth. So for now, let the day fade. Let your breath slow. Let the stories soften in your mind. The clatter and chatter of medieval life receding into silence, because the work is done for now. The lantern is low, the night is deep, and there's nothing else you need to do. You are safe, you are warm, and you are finally still.